All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Thursday, the day that's almost Friday, but isn't. But that's okay. We're getting close, right? Getting close. What's your shirt say there, Aliana? Once a hunter, always a hunter. Where's that from? Oh, that's from Supernatural. You are a hardcore fan, aren't you? You are okay. Okay, so I'm going to say hi to some people here. Ayushi's here. Good morning, Ayushi. And Ananda's here. Hello, Ananda. Michaela's here. Hello, Michaela. I have an email to respond to for you, and I will do that. Adal's here. Good morning, Adal. And Kevin's here. Good morning, Kevin. And Hideel is here. Hello, Hideel. And Shania is here. Hello. So yesterday, we started watching a somewhat violent comic booky film called V for Vendetta, right? But I think in some ways you can already see why we're watching this, right? Because we're dealing with an authoritarian government. Well, a bit of this is fun, but a bit of it is history as well. And so we're dealing with an authoritarian government here, and we talked about a few of these questions yesterday, and we also talked about a bit of the plot and a bit of what's happening, right? So I think we identified a few main characters, definitely V and Evie. So V, the dude in the mask, and Evie, who's Natalie Portman. They're kind of the main characters in this film. But we also have a couple of police inspectors whose names I missed, but we know who they are. We have the Chancellor, who's sort of the authoritarian leader of Britain, right? We have... Who else do we have? Right, we have some government police guys who we met. They won't show up again, well, because they're dead. But oh yeah, there was a guy who defused the bomb. I don't think he's important. There's another guy who will show up a little more today called Creedy, and the police inspector makes reference to him, right? He says that the police inspector wants to talk to Evie before he winds up in one of Creedy's black bags. And I think the police inspector, I think, works for like the regular police, like the police that we might be familiar with. And I think Creedy is like head of the secret police. So he's head of like those finger men, right? The guys who have the badges. And so I think he's like the head of the SS or whatever, if you will. And the inspector is just a regular policeman. Gordon, right? We met Gordon Dietrich, right? So Gordon, as you'll see probably today, actually has kind of a talk show. He's kind of like Seth Meyers, Stephen Colbert, Jimmy Fallon kind of show. He's kind of got one of those. So that's who Gordon is. Okay, and so clearly we've seen that we're living in sort of a slightly futuristic Britain, but not very futuristic, especially since this movie is probably 20 years old now. It's not so much in the future as it was 20 years ago. And we see people living under an authoritarian government. And so remind me very quickly, what were some of the things we saw in terms of ways that the authoritarian government was kind of controlling the people? Curfews, right? There's a curfew system, and curfews are you can't go out of your house after a certain time at night, right? What else? Secret police, right? We've got those finger men running around with their badges doing horrible things. Well, yeah, there's phone tapping, and maybe I'll extend that to mass surveillance, right? There's mass surveillance. So there's cameras everywhere. There's phone tapping. Those cameras have retinal scans so they can identify people on the camera positively. What else do we see? Say what? Yeah, lots and lots of propaganda, which is broadcast by the... Well, anyone could have said it. I just happened to come back to you. Yeah, by the news, right? The BTN. So the British Television Network is basically an instrument of government propaganda, right? The government tells them what to say and how to say it, and they do that, right? And so when V blows up Old Bailey, which is kind of the old law courts building in London, the TV station reports it as, oh, it was a perfectly scheduled demolition, and then some, some of the workers got creative and decided to light fireworks as well. Ha 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 ha, right? But of course we know that's not the case, right? V blew it up. Also, when he sort of takes over the TV station and broadcasts his message, the TV station claims that the terrorist is dead. Indeed, he is not, right? So, again, it's an instrument of government propaganda, right? The people hear what the government wants them to hear. What else? Anything else that we've seen? Did anyone notice, this isn't an answer to this question, but did anyone notice the picture of the chancellor above the fireplace in the family's home? Did anyone catch that? Yeah. It's kind of weird, isn't it? Maybe not for a fascist dictatorship, but does anyone at home have a picture of the country's leader hanging in their house?
We have one for fun.
For fun?
Yeah, we literally just look at it as tourists.
Yeah, but that's not really, but when you put something over the fireplace, that's a pretty important spot, right? That's usually a focal point in the room. That's often where everyone looks. Often the chairs are kind of positioned around the fireplace so everyone's looking at it. So, whatever you put in the spot above the fireplace is an important thing, right? Most people have their TVs there now. That's what goes there. But if you put a picture there, it's usually an important one, right? One that you either really like, or maybe it's a picture, maybe it's a portrait of your whole family. But here we've got the leader of the nation, right? And I guarantee you that of the 36 million people in Canada, nobody has a picture of Justin Trudeau over their fireplace. Except maybe Justin Trudeau. Actually, I wouldn't be surprised if he does. But anyway, that's kind of an interesting thing to pay attention to as well.
I think you added
An extra R in where?
how our minority groups are treated.
Oh, how are minority groups treated by the government? Where's my extra R?
A-R-E.
A-R-E? How are minority groups are treated? Oh, how our minority groups are treated. That's grammatically correct. What are you talking about? No, it's not. There's an extra R. Not an R, but okay. Oops. I'm going to ask you a question too. I don't know if we have full view of that yet, but how do we see that this is a strongly nationalistic government? This is a bit of a trickier one. Yeah. Right. So there was some scathing commentary, if you will, about the U.S. Right, and what seems to be the situation in the U.S. in this film? Yeah, it seems to be a country in chaos, right? A country that's overcome by some kind of disease, right? Prothero calls it a leper colony, which I don't think everyone there has leprosy, but apparently everyone is. This virus has kind of run rampant and infected the population. That doesn't sound like real life in any way, right? Yeah, so they're really speaking in a derogatory fashion about this other country, right? About the U.S. and how Britain is so much better, right? What other nationalistic kind of feelings do we hear?
I think when you spoke about how they deliver the news for the government is being so subjective, they make up the news and it's just their job to say whatever.
I'm not sure that that's necessarily nationalism. They're definitely a tool of propaganda. They're definitely not a legitimate news outlet. I don't know that that's proof of nationalism, or I don't know that's evidence of nationalism. But as a result of getting their talking points from the government, the BTN, you could probably say, is very nationalistic. Like the TV station itself, because the government is that way, and they're giving the talking points to the television station. Anything else? Most of it, I think, is in Louis Prothero's first show, right, where he talks. He speaks very very badly of the U.S. and they're just a bunch of, it's just a overrun leper colony of disease. What a bunch of horrible people, right? So he's really almost dehumanizing the United States, right, and looking down on them. And then he says at the end of his thing, he says he's a proud, or a damn Englishman or whatever, and he's damn proud of it or something, right? So a little bit of nationalism in there, right?
What is leper?
Do you know what leprosy is?
Yeah, the skin gets white.
The skin gets white.
Yeah, it changes color.
Mm-hmm.
Turns into white. It's very, very white. You can see in someone's hand.
Oh no, I have leprosy. Just teasing.
Does it kill you?
Well, yeah. So it's what it is it's a disease. It is contagious by touch, as far as I know. I'm not sure if it's a bacterial infection or a virus or what it is, but yeah, it does cause your skin to discolor, but it actually kind of destroys your skin tissue. And so people with leprosy, as the disease continues, they tend to lose fingers start falling off and ears start falling off and things like that. So it kind of destroys your skin tissue, and so it's kind of a gross disease.
It's not a virus.
I'm not entirely
If you touch them,
I'm not entirely
Fungus?
it's
because I have friends who had this disease, and then I used to hang out with them.
well, it is communicable, right? That's why nobody wants to go anywhere near someone with leprosy. But it's also been almost eradicated in the modern world. But in the past, before it was eradicated, it was people did fear contracting it, I think for obvious reasons, and they kind of shunned people who had it. And so often lepers had to go and live on their own in a little colony because nobody wanted to be anywhere near them because they didn't want to contract this disease. So yeah, they don't have leprosy in the United States in this thing, but they're kind of comparing them to this group of quarantined people who were infected with this disease, right? So, any other evidence for a strongly nationalistic government that you've seen or heard? There might be more.
But them talking about, I forgot the guy's name, but the inspector guy,
Mhm.
police guy, when he said that they should go get her and get her to talk before she ends up in a body bag.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that the government killing people who would possibly go against them?
Oh, right. Right. So when the police detective is trying to get to Evie before the secret police do, he's worried that she's going to disappear, right? And so maybe that's not so much nationalism, but it's definitely fascism, right? Because we know fascists are very comfortable using violence against their own people, and here it seems like the inspector thinks that's exactly what will happen, right? They will find Evie, and then that will be the end of her, right? Okay, there's probably more, but we'll see more as we go on. Okay. Okay, so we're going to watch a little more here. For online people, again, you should be able to go to the library. You should be able to go to find materials. You should be able to go to streaming videos, and you should be able to go to Criterion on Demand in order to get to this page. Don't type in Mean Girls. Type in V for Vendetta, and you should be able to watch the movie. If you're having trouble with it, you may want to restart your computer. Apparently, there's been a few difficulties with Criterion on Demand here, so hopefully today things will work. If they don't work, maybe try and restart your computer and see if that happens. The other thing is, I think Shania was mentioning yesterday that she was able to access this movie through a different source. And so if you can access this movie through, you know, if you're connected to one of those free video places or whatever, wherever you can. What's that? It's on YouTube?
Yeah.
Oh, if it's on YouTube, you can watch it there too. Anywhere you can watch it is fine. You don't have to watch it through this. But this is one way in which you can watch and watch it for free. So hopefully everything will work for people today. Fingers crossed, anyway. Okay, so what we'll do maybe is we will watch. Want to do 35 minutes? 35 minutes and then a break? Or more? 40 minutes? Okay. So we'll watch 40 minutes of it, then we'll take a break, then we'll come back and sort of compare notes and see what we've seen, okay? So 40 minutes. So I'm going to put, I guess that'll bring us back here at 50 minutes. So I'm going to put 50 minutes on the clock, maybe 52 just to be safe. And then watch 40 minutes of the movie, and then come back here and we'll talk about what we've seen, okay? Okay, people, and we're back. Don't you wish you could have a mute button for some people? Don't you wish when people talk, you think you just like mute them? You don't wish that for me, do you? Tell the truth, Amanda. No, are you sure? Okay. Okay, let's talk just a little bit about what's been happening in the movies. So, what in terms of like plot and events, what have we seen? Right, so we see V is kind of going around killing people one after the other, but of course not randomly, right? These people seem to be connected to his past in some way. That was a great scene, wasn't it? When he was talking to that woman, and she's in the bed, and are you gonna kill me? I killed you 10 minutes ago. I was like, ooh. Okay, what else have we seen?
The government was spying on
Right, we see that massive government surveillance with the big truck with all those dishes on the top, right? They're just listening to people's conversations. What else?
And then they were not allowed to follow another religion, maybe?
Yeah, there's certainly some religious oppression going on in this society, right? Definitely. But yeah, so plot-wise, what else are we seeing, Eliana?
I was talking about like that diary thingy he found. There was something reason to connect it to the past.
Right. So the diary that was found, that red book, who'd that belong to?
No,
Right.
I mean, it was.
No, it did. Yeah, it did belong to the woman, the doctor, right?
The doctor.
Yeah. And so what was her? What did we learn from her and her diary? What's her past story?
She used to run an experiment.
Yeah. So she was stationed at that Lark Hill prison or Lark Hill detention center, right? And she's there doing some medical work. And what's she doing? The- Right, and so we were online people. We were talking about this beforehand. Yeah, so that's what the diary says for sure, Michaela. We were talking about this just a little bit before we went back online, and so what's happening here is that the government is trying to create some sort of vaccine or some sort of cure to make sure that its citizens, the British English citizens, are immune from biological attacks. And so what they're doing is they're trying to develop some sort of vaccine. They're, injecting it into these people, and then they're exposing them to a virus, to a biological agent to see if it works. And of course, these people are kind of dying one after the other because their vaccine doesn't work, and you see them being thrown in a mass grave, which is awful, except for one subject, right? Subject number 5, right? And so he, for some reason, doesn't die and seems to actually be gaining some sort of strength or resiliency from the injection that they're giving him, right? So everyone else seems to be dying, but something peculiar about his cellular biology is having a different effect. And so she says that gave us hope that we were headed in the right direction. He might be the key to this. What else does she say in her diary? Right, that he seemed that the injections seemed to have caused him to forget his identity, to forget who he was. Yeah. Where do you think these test subjects? Who were these test subjects?
They were the citizens.
They were what?
Citizens.
Citizens? Enemies of the state.
Why their clothing was always very like taken away at night, like sneaker or something.
Mainly the people who used to talk against the government, they kind of used for the test.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that there's people who are undesirable in the state, right? And so perhaps, I think it would be fair to say that there are immigrants in there, perhaps people with mental disabilities, people who are, again, enemies of the state, who have resisted the government. All these kind of, I think the people that Hitler would have called undesirable, these are the same people that are being sent to this detention facility and are being experimented on, right? What else happens?
The experiment, the failed ones, they just dumped them.
Yeah, there's just a mass grave, right? And they're just dumping these people in a hole, right? Yeah. What else do we see? Oh yeah, the inspector, the police inspector, is kind of starting to connect things, right? He's starting to become suspicious. And so what does he say when he's in the office with his other police detective guy? He turns on that little bzzzt, that little scrambler, right? So nobody can listen in on their conversation. And then what does he say?
He's like, what if like the government had a hand in killing a lot of people?
Right, because that government facility, they were working on trying to create a cure for a biological weapon to make their people immune. Did they succeed in doing that? Not so much, right? But what else? But what did they have? They had a weapon, right? So they didn't have the cure, but they had the virus, right? And so what do you think happened? What's the police detective suspecting? Right. So the police detective is saying, what if some of these guys released the virus into the population and then used it to gain power, right?
That's what he read in the newspaper.
I don't know. I think that might have caused him to believe that. I don't think it said that in the.
He came up with that idea that
He,
that might happen.
He did come up with the idea, yeah. I think what we saw from the doctor was that she thought she was doing something good. She thought she was doing something for her country and that would protect everyone. But then she started to, as she saw how the trials started to go, she started to say, "Oh God, what are we doing here?" Right? So.
Like a painless death.
Yeah, but she dies painlessly, but she had good intentions at the beginning, right? She thought she was going to protect the people, and then she sees that, oh gosh, actually we're just experimenting on these poor people and they're just dying one after the other. This is terrible, right? And so that's what V says, right? She says, I didn't mean for that to happen, and he says, I didn't come here for what you meant to do. I came here for what you did, right? Man, he's got good lines.
We also see the hedges symbol in the guy's face.
Oh, right. So Gordon, what do we find out about Gordon, her friend, Evie's friend Gordon? Huh? He's a little interesting, hey? So he's got this tiny little room hidden in his house, hidden in his wine cellar, I guess. And what's in that room?
There's a Quran, there's a swastika symbol.
Quran, kind of a swastika symbol. What else? Yeah, he's got some erotica, right? He's got some various erotica, and I'm not sure what. I kind of assumed that Gordon was gay. Is he?
I think so.
I think so too. I think that's what, or at least maybe bisexual. But I kind of assumed that he was, because he says that, right? He says that he's not allowed to desire the people he desires, and so he, is commonly seen in the company of beautiful young women because. What's that?
You never told explicitly.
No, they didn't. But I think you're meant to assume that, right? So yeah, we find out that Gordon may be a gay man. Is that okay in this society? Clearly not, right? So he's hiding that, right? He's covering that up. And he's got this little room full of stuff that the government has banned, right? So
So the flag, which was kind of like the swastika was on it, it also had half Britain and half the US flag.
hmm.
I get that poster being button. But that looked kind of like propaganda.
Yeah, it was a God Save the Queen kind of thing, but it was the Chancellor's face, right? Not the Queen's, which was kind of, again, something that wasn't very flattering to the Chancellor, so I'm sure it's banned, right? So yeah, so Gordon is someone who's not accepted by the state, and so he has to cover that. He has to cover up his sexual orientation, and he's also got a little room full of all sorts of stuff that is banned by the government. And in that way, I guess he's like V, right? Because V has lots of things that are banned by the government as well, right?
And then they both make the same breakfast.
Yeah, and that was, yeah, and so I think, you know, the story is trying to connect these two, right? To connect Gordon and V. Yeah. Bonjour, mademoiselle.
Partners.
Well, I don't know. I don't know. I guess it's not impossible. I think the movie is trying to compare the two of them. I don't know that they necessarily are connected, but it's hard to know, right? What else should we? Oh, okay. And there's one more thing.
About her parents.
Oh yeah, about her parents. What do we learn about her parents? Evie's parents.
His parents, they were like against the government. They were doing something, and then they were protesting, and then they were trying to gather people to protest against the government. And yeah, the government.
Yeah, so the Norse Fire government is what they're called. They were in the process of taking power, and they were in the process of quashing protests of the people, but Evie's parents were opposed, right? And they protested and they demonstrated and eventually disappeared, right? And died in prison.
Yeah, they got into politics after the brother died.
Right. So their brother died of this virus, right? This St. Mary's virus. And so, yeah, she says they became political. They started demonstrating against the government and protesting. That led to their arrest and their disappearance. And then we learn from the police inspector that they die in prison, right? So her mother was on a hunger strike. So she chose not to eat in order to protest and died. And her father was, it sounded like some sort of like prisoner uprising that he was killed in. It sounded like. And so Evie is just a little girl, and so they put her into a retraining, a reclamation project, right? So she was kind of re-educated by the state after her parents died. Anything?
And she also like betrays me.
Oh yeah, and she tries to betray V, right? So V kind of asks for her help in murdering the bishop, right? And so she kind of goes along with it, but then she tries to, she kind of throws him under the bus a little bit, right? She tries to say to the priest, hey, actually, can you get me out of this situation, right? And he thinks it's some sort of weird sex game, unfortunately, but it's too late for her to get help, and it's too late for him as well, right? Okay, I think that covers it. Actually, and that answers a few questions.
And do you remember the TV program, TV news and all?
Oh yeah, the two counselors.
The
The
two
last
chancellors
part.
thing.
The guy.
Oh, yeah. And we saw that yeah, so Gordon has kind of I guess a variety show or an evening, a late show on TV. And he says, yeah, I threw out the censor's script, so the one that the government provides him. He threw it out and wrote his own script, and they did the show. And so what do we see in the show?
Fake weak like attacks him, and there are two. So
Yeah, so it looks like he's interviewing the chancellor, and then we've got V in the background playing tricks on the chancellor, and then they're running around in a very silly, cartoony, comic fashion. And then it turns out that the chancellor is under the mask, and there's two of them, and it's all very silly and goofy, right?
last feel like the sign that maybe they think that we is not dead.
Well, maybe. But what do you think's going to happen to Gordon?
He's probably going to be in trouble because isn't he implying that the chancellor is a terrorist?
Perhaps. Do you think he's just having some fun with this whole situation, or do you think he's actually trying to make a statement? What's the statement? What's that?
Maybe the government is doing this itself to like get more power.
Maybe this is some sort of government plot, right? Maybe V isn't really a terrorist, but a government operative. Maybe, sorry, Amanda, what did you say?
That the government is behind.
Yeah, that the government is behind this. Maybe that there's no difference, right? Maybe the government should be seen as a terrorist, just like V. Maybe he's saying this whole thing is ridiculous. Maybe he's just trying to poke some fun at the chancellor, because the chancellor doesn't look very good in that sketch, right? It's kind of silly, right? And V's kind of making a fool of the chancellor as well, right? So he ties his shoelaces together when he's not looking, and he gives them one of these exploding cigar, gags, and so there's all sorts of silly stuff going on. But he's kind of making a fool of the chancellor, right? So we'll probably see, but that's not going to play out so well for our good friend Gordon. Why are some things being censored by the government? Why are some things not allowed anymore? So V has a bunch of stuff that's censored. Gordon has a bunch of stuff that's censored. What kind of stuff is banned by the government and why? Well, what kind of stuff is banned by the government? Perhaps, yeah, perhaps that. I think that the flag with the swastika, I think is a symbol of the resistance to the government. I think that's what it is, and so I think that's why it's banned. It's not necessarily the Nazi thing, but I think it's a resistance to the government, which would be. But what else? The Quran is? Why might the Quran be banned? Because they're probably anti-Muslim. Do you think this is a state with some sort of religion? Yeah, well, it's possible. I think there's some sort of Christian church. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be Catholic or United, like Protestant church, but either way, it probably is Catholic. Bishops are Catholic. So the Catholic Church seems to be very closely connected with the government, right? So they've probably banned all other religions, and the Quran is probably a banned religion and a banned book. What else has been banned? They're not allowed to go out?
No, without any reason.
Oh,
Because they were to stay at home.
oh yeah, that's not censorship though, but you're right. They were required to stay home.
There were a whole lot of books
Yeah, there's all kinds of other books that are banned as well, right? So books with maybe ideas that are contrary to or threatening to the government, those are all banned.
We had all those books. I was like, what? Didn't you have all the stacked books?
Yeah, books are banned, right? Because information is powerful, right? And to the government, it's dangerous because a government like this doesn't like people talking, right? It doesn't like a free exchange of ideas. It doesn't like anything contrary to the government, and so the government very tightly controls people's information, what they can see, what they can hear, what they can read, and anything challenging or threatening to the government becomes illegal, right? And at the very beginning, you'll notice that piece of music that V plays while he's blowing up the law court building, that's banned as well, right? The chancellor says, I never want to hear that song again. So that song is censored. So again, the government, anything that is a challenge to the government, or maybe is a challenge to the sort of supposed morality of the culture, is also banned, right? So different religions are banned. Gordon's, why is the song banned? Because V used it during a terrorist attack. And it's an upbeat, celebratory kind of piece of music, and he used it to blow up the law court building. So the chancellor was upset and said, "Yeah, I never want to hear that song again." So, and nobody ever will. Yeah, so lots of censorship, right? Lots of control of information, lots of propaganda broadcasted by broadcasted by the British television network. We've got government operatives surveilling everything people say and, well, maybe not think, but everything people say, and they monitor it, right? We see that communications guy report to the chancellor and saying, yeah, we're, based on random sweeps, we're seeing that 80% of people still believe that the terrorist is alive, and positive mentions have increased 12%, right? So they're listening to everything that people say and probably write about this thing and reporting back to the government so they can either they can present things a certain way. Okay. Any other kind of questions or things we should say about V for Vendetta right now? Still good? How would you rate this movie so far out of 10?
8.5.
8.5?
It's a really good movie.
Ashley? Okay. Aliana? Not bad? Not bad? Okay. So, okay. That's all we'll do for today then, because we've only got a few minutes left. Tomorrow we'll come back and I think we'll finish this film. We'll finish the last few questions and talk about a little bit about maybe terrorism and authoritarian governments, and then I think then we're into Russia and the Soviet Union. So more authoritarianism. Okay, so that's all for today. Online people, we'll see you tomorrow at 8, and we'll finish up this movie. Goodbye.